Wow. As you've seen, we live in a complex world. It's a highly interdependent ecosystem, and it's changing and evolving. And as humans, like you and I, we play a major role in the future. I think the one thing that Ravi forgot to mention is that I also wear a third cap, and that's marketing. You would think after 5 successful user conferences, I wouldn't be as nervous, but I still am. So thank you very much for joining our session. And I know that you had a lot to choose from, but you chose to be here today, and it matters to us. So thank you again. So sustainability starts with geography. In many ways, I'm going to tell you why. Geography provides the science and the fundamental language of social, economic, and environmental being brought together by us. We play an important role to ensure that we use geospatial systems to create positive impacts, knowing the science around us. We can analyze relationships. We can also, with these 3 subjects, we can use geospatial technologies to achieve sustainability, knowing that these three subjects play an important role in the ecosystem. So in today's session, we're going to highlight 3 important areas on how organizations are achieving sustainability using geospatial technologies. Of course, there are many others, but we are going to be looking at mapping resource distribution. GIS maps reveal how natural resources are distributed by allowing optimized use and conservation strategies that balance human needs and environmental protection. We will then look at how SANParks goes in and monitors environmental changes, how the GIS track changes in land use, climate, and ecosystems over time by providing crucial data for early intervention and adaptation management. We will then look at planning sustainable development from Sasol on how they use GIS data where stakeholders can design development projects that minimize impacts while promoting and enhancing efficiency by improving safety mandates and facilitating comprehensive safety record benefits for compliances within their organizations. And here are our 4 key people for today's session. I would have Kenneth Ramashia from Sibanye Stillwater. He will go up first, talking about resource redistribution. We will have Michael, director from Swift Geospatial, that will talk about environmental and monitoring. We have Thabang, that's going to talk about safety and compliance and how it's important for sustainable development within an organization. And lastly, to end it off, we will have Chenay from SANParks. We won't be having any questions during the presentation, so our presenters will come forth and present. We will then have a panel discussion that Ravi Pillay will facilitate. All right, so please keep your questions to the end, write them down so that you don't forget. Okay, Kenneth, you're welcome.
Good morning, colleagues. I just want to quickly give you a brief background of who we are, where we come from. I am Kenneth Ramashia. I came here with my highly intelligent support team member, Josina Mafodi. She will answer all the most technical and difficult questions. So we are from Sibanye, and I just wanted to introduce who we are before we actually go into the presentation. We are a leading international precious metal mining company, a diverse portfolio of platinum group metal, PGMs, gold operation, and projects. We are the world's largest primary producer of platinum, the 2nd largest primary producer of palladium, 3rd largest producer of gold, and significant producer of rhodium. Global leader in recycling and processing of spent PGM catalytic converter material. You can all come and join us. This is not interesting company. So how do we apply geography tools in sustainability? At Sibanye, we had quite a number of projects that we have used. One of the Esri products that we implemented, quite a number of various projects that I would really wanted to share with you. However, some of these projects are very sensitive, but I'll just give you some highlight of the work that we have done using the Esri product. So we have the waste and tailing storage facility management project where we are actually managing our TSF across the globe, where we are in Europe, Australia, US, and here in South Africa. So what we do here, we have hired environmental engineers who came and calculate the possibility of the impact of the TSF should they get broken, what and who will be affected. So we map those areas. We then develop a tool that we then share with our TSF management team. So that project, we are developing it. We still going into details in terms of looking at the piezometers and et cetera, looking at the actual monitoring of the TSF. The infrastructure and economic development and community profiling, that is what I will actually share with you this morning. Security management, which is also a very interesting project where we look at the impact of the zamazamas in our mining areas. We are able to identify when these things happen, where these things happen, and how can we then put more resources in that area where we are having these security incidences. Management and environmental monitoring points. This is very helpful in our mining space. We look at monitoring air, monitoring water, monitoring different types of gases around our mining area and the impact that it will have, and our environmental management teams, they're looking at using the GIS tool that we have developed for them to manage this space. The underground stopping progression, this is very critical for the mining people. They are now able to understand and see, the managers are able to see what is actually happening underground, where we build an integration between the GIS and the MRM database, because the surveyors will go underground, measure the progression of stopping. We get that information, we put it into the GIS, and then the actual managers, they are able to see what is actually happening underground. The last but not least is obviously property and surface infrastructure management, and this is one of the critical area where we are looking at what we own, what we don't own, and the relationship between what we own and the cost that municipality is charging to us. So, infrastructure and economic development project. Colleagues, this project, we started at identifying the project that the CED team were building. And this was very critical because they were sort of capturing all this information and put it on the spreadsheet, and nothing happens, and it becomes a huge challenge where they had to report. So the Department of Minerals, they will ask them, say, where this project were implemented, and they don't know how to present them. So we developed this tool. So as you see on the screen there, the first thing that we did was just to create a tool where they are able to know where they are, where these projects are located, and what type of project are they, CSI, et cetera, the SLP project and the CSI project, et cetera. So we were then able to show them the progress of those individual projects. So the managers will be able to see a specific project. If they want to do a report, they're able to understand where they are. In some instances, we also put the pictures as an evidence to say this particular project was completed, and the condition of that project, what it is at the present moment. And lastly, we were able to show them in terms of the cost. This part is very complex. Josina, she's still working on this part of the project, because there is quite a lot of difficulties in terms of building the relationship between how the finance report and how the CED, who is the owner of the project, report. So we are working on the completing this part where they will be able to see the cost of the project, whether they want the cost per month, per week, per year, and that's where the complex part of it is. And the second part of this project is the community profiling. This is where we want to understand the mining, what type of the impact as the mining we have in our community, and we also need to understand our community. So we want to understand firstly, which communities around our minings are. And then we use the zone of influence tool that the CED team used to identify those areas. And then we further calculate the social facilities around those communities, because this is very critical to understand the social facilities around our communities, because at a regular time we've been asked to develop or to build certain social facilities such as schools, clinics, hospitals, etc., etc. So sometimes we get involved in the politics of the community, and then we end up building social infrastructure that are no longer used. So they are now using this tool to understand and say, in this particular area where this community are asking for a clinic, what is it that we have? And what type of the infrastructure do we have? And then we can make a decision based on that information that we have, they have actually used from the GIS. So then you have, we then further to also understand, before you build a school or a clinic or a hospital, what are the bases of building those social facilities? We're using CSIR, the red book, where it actually guides us that a particular community of, let's say, 5,000 members, what type of facilities you can, I mean, if you're considering clinic, how many people must be there for you to build a clinic? So they were able to use this tool to identify areas where they can then build those facilities. So this is one example of the area. I think here I've used a Ghana section where you can see the red area. Those are the type of the facilities that they can actually consider to build them. And lastly, this is an example of operations which so we further look at the distance between the operation and the communities, and then we look at the distance, how far are we in terms of these facilities, because some of the areas that we call them zones of influence, you'll find that they are not necessarily zones of influence. People will just want to use a Sibanye for their own benefit. So we use this tool as well to identify the distance between ourselves and the community. So this is the same example that I've showed you before, that we use this project to identify various communities' distance from where we are and the type of the facility that already existed. So it is really detailed, this project, in terms of what you can actually extract and what type of information you can get. So what it fundamentally does is that it empowers the company to understand the type of the project that they need to implement as required by the Department of Minerals and Energy. So they are no longer going to implement a project without really understanding their social environment before understanding their area. So they use this tool to really garner that clear understanding of what type of the society or the community they're operating in. So there is no excuse for now for our mining company to build social facilities that are not utilized because they didn't really look at what they have. So what we can actually, colleagues, take away from my side, which to me is very critical, we can really look at geography is the foundation of sustainability, because it helps us understand the relationship between the people, places, and the environment. It also helps us that we learn how natural resources are distributed. It also helps us to understand what human activities, which they call other anthropogenic activities, affected our ecosystem. Example of monitoring the pollution of the environment. Then we get to understand what we can do in terms of managing those anthropogenic activities. How to plan for the balanced future. So it sort of assists us then to then understand how can we then balance our planned future than to really impact positively in our environment as a mining company. And lastly, geography provides digital tools and knowledge to create sustainable world that we live in. Thank you very much.
Morning, colleagues.
Morning.
Okay. So today I'll be sharing with you how we are driving sustainability through digital scaffolding and health, digital scaffold health and compliance monitoring. This solution to us was more than just a digital solution. It was really about saving lives, reducing risk, and promoting sustainable compliance. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, terms and conditions. Just to set the scene, ladies and gentlemen, a petrochemical industry looks like this. It's very complex, it's very wide, spans thousands of square kilometers. And to really access any of these facilities, scaffolding plays a very critical role, and its safety is thereof. So scaffolding really enables us to access this scaffolding assists us to actually access this different resources in our petrochemical industry to prevent us from falling, from injuries, and to actually access and do construction, which is really a foundation for moral, legal, and sustainable safety. However, it has limitations. Currently, we don't know where our scaffolding are located, and there are gaps, therefore, with regards to compliance to safety. And in order to address these solutions or these problems, the digital inspection system really provides an opportunity to optimize scaffolding safety, reduce risk, and ensure regulatory sustainability by providing platforms for real-time inspection, automated compliance, tracking, and streamlined communication, thereby enhancing efficiency and improving adherence to safety mandates and facilitating comprehensive safety records. The business problem was really clear. Manual scaffolding were very time-consuming, they were inconsistent, they were prone to error, and we couldn't tell where they are located. And the inspection of these scaffolds were using paper-based, which is really which is a problem. And the requirement from business was really to just improve visibility via a central monitoring system and to provide a digital solution just to ensure compliance. And as a result, the aim of this solution really was to digitalize the scaffolding inspection with georeference data and to enable our managers to be able to see where all the scaffolding are and to therefore reduce audit findings. After doing business requirement statements and functional review statements, we realized that the solution that needed to be built had to mimic how the business is and the business process. And as a result, this solution really linked SAP work orders and inspections from mobile devices on the field, which are geotagged, into a central SQL enterprise geodatabase, and therefore visualizing all these inspections and their statuses on the Esri dashboard. The Esri dashboard really provided us with the ability to view all these statuses and therefore to track our resources and to see where all those are, really allowing central visibility and accountability. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, by leveraging digital inspection systems, scaffolding management transformation, we were able to transform the scaffolding, inspection, and management into a proactive, data-driven process that not only safeguards workers and minimizes risk, but also ensures continuous compliance, operational efficiency, and long-term sustainability. And as you can see, there were challenges, but also the opportunities are there, whereby we can then leverage 3D models into actually ensuring that people can be able to see this, the scaffolds, and we can also expand this into multiple sites. Thank you.
First of all, Verosha, Ravi, thank you very much for allowing me to present today. Today's presentation is just going to be really a case study, one of our clients in the tobacco industry, and we're just walking the journey with them around portions of ESG, sustainability, and helping them to become more accountable for their actions that they are damaging or performing on the earth, and then keeping track of monitoring that for their audit purposes in order to meet their commitments, right? So this is just a presentation around how we got there. But before there, I like to give Swift Geospatial a shameless punt, in case there's anybody out there that wants to talk to me afterwards. My name's Michael Breetzke. I'm one of the directors and co-founders of Swift Geospatial. We are just over 9 years old. Can you believe it? Verosha was one of the keys in getting us onboarded with the startup program at Esri. I think that was in 2017, as I mentioned there. And then since then, we've just kind of grown, and people pay us for our services, which still amazes me from time to time. And from then, we realized that in order to be successful, it's all about partnerships. So that's what's so great about this conference, is that it brings people from many different walks of life and different many industries. And if we can just all, have a chat and discuss over a beer or over a glass of wine or a cup of tea, you can actually start sharing a lot of ideas. We don't always need to be insular, right? So we can kind of create these partnerships and learn from each other. But ultimately, what we do is that we use remote sensing. We use satellite-based information as our raw data, and then we try and convert that into insights. Obviously, everyone's talking about AI, so I have to put AI there. Are we really implementing it? No. No, but if you don't have it, then no one takes you seriously, right? We kind of are. I'll show you some examples later on about where we want to be headed with it. But I think it's about those things about not trying to be an ostrich, right? AI is here, it's coming, so don't put your head in the sand. Try and embrace it to streamline your operations. Last slide about me, I promise. This is the four main products that we service. Swift Forest is products for the commercial forestry industry as well as natural forestry, and kind of ESG fits into that. Swift Farm is for our agricultural clients, but more than just the field, we're trying to create an integrated system looking at the whole farming complex, the whole farm, the workings of a farm. That's still very much work in progress. So if anyone's got ideas around that, let me know. Swift Detect, that's around encroachment monitoring, linear structures, informal settlements, illegal logging, illegal mining, those types of things. And then Swift Mine is for our mining clients, monitoring TSFs, monitoring encroachment, dwelling counts, security risks, those types of things. All right, but why are we here? We're here because I want to talk to you about our ongoing relationship and partnership with Philip Morris International. Now, PMI, for those of you who don't know, are one of, I think they're the third largest tobacco company in the world. And they basically make products like Marlboro, for those of you that are still hardcore smokers that reject vaping. I salute you. Not that I'm a smoker, but I think there's some value in not smoking or vaping. But anyway, that's a separate topic for another day. And Chesterfields. And so their new commitment now is to be 100% smoke-free company, which is a bit weird because they tobacco, right? So I'm not too sure how that all works. I'm still trying to figure that out. But ultimately, they're trying to now understand how much damage they've done historically, right? So it's all very well that moving forward you want to do stuff, but you've got to look at the past, right? understand and get that as your baseline, not just today, right? And then obviously like how most companies want to be like deforestation free by 2030 or sourcing free by whatever. Those are all nice and pretty words, but where's the accountability? Where's the actions that can show that? And so we were fortunate enough to pitch an idea to them, and they liked it. And so for the past 3 years, we've been kind of building a sustainability monitoring application, so to speak. It's still in progress, obviously, because these type of exercises are complicated. But ideally, they want to understand things like deforestation, which is easy, like land use change, site analysis, natural versus planted forestry, proximity analysis to biodiversity. So they're trying to take a lot of data sets, and then data sets that they have, and try and bring it all back into one centralized unit. And that's the power of where Esri comes in. The biggest problem we have, and thank heaven I'm bald already, otherwise I would be losing hair on the second, is that the area of interest is 120 million hectares globally, right? That's a lot. So, it's a big elephant, right? So how do you know how the saying goes, bit by bit, right? It's a bit crude saying when no one wants to eat an elephant. But anyways, it's that type of concept. So what are their challenges, and how do we try and walk on this journey? And I think the thing is that these are never once-off projects. Sustainability cannot be a once-off project. Like, it has to be an ongoing journey where you both interact and learn and move forward. So I'll give you some insights on how we try to manage 120 million hectares. Okay, so basically the problems are pretty much what most people experience, I would imagine, in the sustainability world, right? In their case, there's cross-regional complexity. They don't have one site. They source tobacco leaf and trees from all over the world, right? In pretty much every single continent. So how do they understand that? How do they understand the environmental impacts, stakeholder expectations? It's becoming more and more like more and more people are wising up to the idea that you can't just greenwash something. Like, show me the proof, right? So if you eat a bar of Nestle chocolate, it's 100% cocoa sourcing free from deforestation. It's probably a lie to a certain extent, right? But like, show me where on your website you source this cocoa from, right? And don't say Ghana, because that's not good anymore. Like, what is the field? Who's the farmer? When did it? So now people are getting to that level, and even your stakeholders and investors now are starting to wisen up to that and say, but show me where. Like, how can I? Because they don't want to be tainted later on, if it all get mud in their face. So it's a big thing. The stakeholder expectations and obviously customers, supply chains, social responsibility, ethical sourcing. Some of these things can all be solved through GIS. Some of them can't, right? And that's where the systems of systems. Like, you have to have integrated from many other different data sources. But the key is trying to put that all into one area. Okay, so it's like whenever I think of if clients come to us and they've got a particular problem or they want us to assist with something, I always think of myself or our team as kind of like architects, right? Like solution architects to a certain extent, not really JS specialists, because each problem is generally different. They're not all kind of copy-paste. And so we have to create a solution that makes sense for them. And often I refer to it as kind of like a recipe book, right? So there's a lot of recipes in the recipe book, and each recipe book has its own ingredients that you use in order to make a cake or whatever the case is, right? My preference is a vanilla cake with caramel on top, and then you take the flake and you just sprinkle the flake on top. It's delicious. But anyways, you can use that kind of idea to make the cake, right? You've got all these different elements, technology from Esri that they can provide. You've got different data sources that you can link into. And the key for the final product is, and I actually messed up the order here. It should have been data collect, analyze, visualize, insights, right? But anyways, I'll have a quiet word with myself later. The data collection part is probably the easiest part. There's almost too much data. right? And then if you know where to look and what to do, and that's why like Living Atlas and those types of things makes a lot of sense because it's been vetted for you, right? As opposed to some website that you're a little bit unsure whether you should click on in the first place, right? But anyways, and then it's about visualization and insights, which is the most important, right? And then also part of the visualization is understanding that you have to visualize the data that you've processed to non-GIS people, right? So no offense, I'm not trying to sell this to you guys because you know what's going on, and a lot of you don't sign the check at the end of the day, right? It can be like the manager or the executive who sits at the top and he just wants to look at something that says red bad, green good, right? What's my problem and where it is? He's not interested in how I collected the data or how I processed the data. So it's about thinking further down to the last, like how do I visualize this to the end client that makes sense for my 5-year-old? Ooh, that sounds bad. Luckily, Patrick's not here. Hey, I'm not referring to executives as 5-year-olds, but basically along those lines, right, where they can get the answers straight away. And then insights. I always think that GIS, as its entirety, is about decision support. Never telling you the answer. I'm giving you decision support for you to make the final answer yourself. And whether you decide to use it or not, it's not up to me, right? And now that decision support's been morphed into insights. So taking the raw data and creating insights. So that's kind of the recipe. And then these are the ingredients that goes into the recipe. And we can pick which ones we use and ones that we don't like and ones that make sense to us and don't make sense to us, right? So for starters, if I'm monitoring 120 million hectares, they'll be flying drones forever. It's never going to work, right? Because the areas are massive. You can maybe use a tip and cue type scenario where if you pick up a problem, then go fly a drone. But generally, they're tough to reach areas, large areas. So maybe that's not going to go into my ingredients list. So obviously for us, satellite data makes sense. When you're looking at another 120 million hectares, am I going to use paid for satellite data? No, it's a terrible idea because it's just going to be too expensive, right? So I'm going to use the free satellite data. So obviously, I'm going to look at the Sentinel 1s and 2s, even Landsat at this stage, right, in order to get a bigger picture of what's happening on the ground. On-ground sensors and GPS sensors for this project, for them, it was more around water, so water consumption, drip irrigation, those type of things, so we can bring in onboard sensors. And on-ground sensors doesn't always have to be GPS sensors, right? It can be just regular people observing things, which is still very, very powerful. So you can take those types of observations and collect them through Survey 123 to bring into your workflow. Weather data is obviously important, population data, topographical data. So we kind of pick which data sets are going to work for them, which sets that they already have, and we try and put that all together, mix it around, and throw it into the oven, and then hopefully your cake doesn't flop. In my case, it does flop quite often, and we just cut those pieces away, and then the kids don't mind. They're still delicious. All right, okay, so for PMI, we settled on 3 main avenues, and this is still an ongoing project with them. Right, so for any tobacco company, it's split into 2 factors. One is leaf, so that's what we're looking at here. So that's just your burley leaf, and then you get another one called flute or something, whatever. But there's two of them. And so they want to know 2 things. They want to know, obviously, the existing crops that they have, are they healthy? You know, what's up the yield expectations that they can receive from it? But that's not from a sustainability exercise. The sustainability exercise comes in from your precision irrigation, right? So in this case, not in Africa, but in North America, they want to understand how much water they're using per field, right? And through drip irrigation, as opposed to just wasting water in their growth of their leaf. And then in other parts of the world, they have programs where they supply farmers with seed, right? And then the small-scale farmers would go out and then sow the seed and then plant, and then they get the tobacco. So twofold there. One is the farmer actually planting it. 2 is it growing. And by creating new agriculture fields, is it in breach of any sustainability laws that they should be aware of? Right? So, albeit not right now for EUDR, but tobacco, although technically it is because of the wood that they need to cure, but I'll get to that. what they need to understand is there any type of biodiversity loss by providing farmers with seed to grow tobacco fields, right? And they want to keep an eye on that. The second one, which we are hopefully launching next year, is to understand resource optimization, right? Water resource optimization. They want to have a much clearer, better idea of the consumption of water that they're going to be using on all of their fields. This one's got a massive question mark because I'm not too sure how to solve that one just yet. Still working. If anyone's got an idea, let me know, please. And then the last segment of it, which is our main focus in the last couple of years from them, is kind of mapping no-go zones, continuous monitoring biodiversity protection, right? Is understanding where they source their leaf and then their timber. Has it impacted negatively in the communities? Is it aiding into biodiversity loss? How can they put in programs to undo the damage that they've done in the past? And I can tell you now the answer of creating your own nursery with one tree isn't the right answer, right? It's just monocropping at its worst. It's not really working. And so they're starting to get to that point where they're planting now indigenous trees in certain areas to try and bolster up the biodiversity, but they need to understand where their risk is. And so for us on these kind of sectors here, this is where Esri works so well, because their main problem was all of the data sets that they got were so fragmented. It was from this one website and then this area here, and then this person did their own thing. And it just kind of sat randomly. And so by doing something super basic, like creating a geodatabase or a portal or a catalog with all of their data sets, they could get access to all of their data sets. And then doing analytics on those data sets and on that area, we could then bring it into a nice, easy to digest experience builder. So take it or leave it. If you're doing dashboards, maybe move to experience builder, because it's really cool. It's a lot more trickier, but the stuff that you can get out of it and through develop, like, it's just totally worth it if you can get there, right? Dashboarding is a bit limited with what you can do, but anyways. So for this one here, it's about deforestation, right? And so they want to know in their areas throughout the world how much deforestation is occurring year in and year out. They don't know if it's directly their fault of the deforestation, but they can understand and start to develop risk maps for certain countries and certain regions. Where certain regions start to have higher deforestation, they can then send people out to them to understand why the deforestation is occurring. And why it's big in the tobacco industry is because your cigarettes, the paper on the outside comes from trees, right? And burning of trees and wood also comes from curing of the tobacco. So it's really, really important. And what you start to find out in regions is the more fields you have, the less woody vegetation around it starts to disappear, because you're now cutting down that vegetation to cure the tobacco, right? And so they're starting to build nurseries. So there's a lot of back and forward, but they need to understand their internal risks. So when they do the reporting, they have a better understanding. Another one of their sites that we monitor all the time is land use, land cover change. Once again, just trying to get a broad understanding of if there's any change occurring in and around their areas. Mainly change from wooded areas to agriculture is to be flagged. And to understand why agriculture fields are springing up in vegetated areas where they shouldn't be, in natural wooded areas where they shouldn't be. And once again, sending out people to Survey 123 to collect the information to bring it back to understand a little bit more. And so for now, it's about getting the general idea. And then we do also planted versus natural. And this works really well using multispectral satellite data, right? To understand what is a natural forest and what is a planted forest. Generally, a planted forest is in a block, which is a dead giveaway. And texture differences and these types of things, and monocropping and these types of things, right, as opposed to your natural vegetation. But they want to understand, once again, how much biodiversity is being lost in this case, not just trees, biodiversity loss, and how can they counteract that, or how much money they have to pay in fines, or whatever happens at the end of the day. And then the last one, using Esri's onboard proximity analysis and alerts, is that they can then take the data from deforestation, take the data from land use, land cover change, and put it into proximity alerts. And then that will tell them if they're edging closer and closer to no-go zones, right? So areas where they shouldn't be even remotely close to. And so they're not just interested in their field, they're interested in the broader area surrounding their field, which I think is quite nice, because most people are just interested in their field. But they're interested in the whole area around the field in order to get a clearer understanding. And at the end of the day, using all of this type of technology, they just want to have supply chain transparency. Is it there? No. Are we getting there? Hopefully. It takes a lot more effort and a lot more work in order to really understand that concept of farm to fork type vibe, or in this case, farm to what's your mouth, smoking into your lungs. But that's the kind of ideas that they want to try and achieve that transparency so that they can be confident in the reporting and the auditing that they put out. That they now have evidence-based solutions of how bad it is, but they are making steps to monitor to make sure it doesn't get worse and then to mitigate the steps. And then the last two slides, promise. It's just then the benefits that what we see of geospatial analysis over the last 3 years with PMI is just the internal growth of the company itself and how they can actually leverage it. A lot of companies that we speak to see GIS as that little icon on the screen, as Arc Pro that they double click and somebody tries to put in a layer, right? And then they do it. But there's so much more to it, and I'm still learning. Like, massively about all the applications and toolboxes that you have access to and slowly integrating them into these systems. And then through all of this, we're seeing more decision making being driven from the work that we're doing. Ultimately, it still goes into a massive PDF document, but at least there's some now derived information that can be used to move forward in actionable insights. The future of the product and the project that we're dealing with PMI, two main things here really is talent development. So it's about having key people in those organizations that understand what you are doing and they can help with their own analytics internally. So we're moving away from us trying to do all of the analytics, but rather assisting with them doing some of the analytics as well and building up the competence inside. You'd think that they would have that with a massive organization, but they don't. And then obviously AI enhancement analytics, and really for us, it's about speeding up the processing of 120 million hectares. We know how to do it. It just takes a long time now, right? So if we could speed that up, that means we can get them more answers quicker, and they can use that to inform more decisions, which is key. And so those are the two main takeaways. But none of this would be possible without the advancements of Esri. So even what was spoken earlier, the Esri AI assistants now, and these types of things, this is what we want to integrate into our solution to help speed up the problem. It was the keynote this morning said it took 12 months, Jack, back in the day, and now it took 1 hour, right? So this project for PMI that we do still takes about 12 months just to process 120 million hectares. Now, if we can speed that up to quarterly, something along those lines, now the value is a lot higher. And then hopefully we can also reduce our internal costs, which would be great. But in any event, that's just kind of a story from a client of ours that I wanted to share with everyone here, just to understand their sustainability journey. And the key word there is journey. So it's not a start and stop situation. It's an ongoing battle. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I must say I also dislike mics, but we'll persevere. So my name is Chenay Sims. I work for the scientific services at South African National Park, based in Skukuza in Kruger National Park. So, I have the privilege of living, in Kruger. So I'm going to be talking to you guys today about how we in Kruger use spatial data to enhance our sustainability objectives. Now, within Kruger, we use a lot of different data sets. Some of them are very sophisticated and high-tech, as you can see. But some of our less high-tech ones is what we call Cyber Tracker, or it's a Cyber Tracker software, which is an open source software that the rangers use for their field patrols to go and record all their biodiversity sightings in a digital database that we can then use in our GIS. We also use other more traditional systems, the camera traps up at the top, the elephants with the collar. And if you look closely at my giraffe, you will see he's got earrings in. And that is what the animal collars of the future look like. Those are little solar panels that power mini GPS tags on the animals. So, it's not just AI that is in the future. We are also changing how our animals look. We also use a couple of online systems. One of the big ones in the region and within Kruger is also an open source one called Earth Ranger. And then you can't come to an Esri conference and not talk about our Esri products. So we use for our data capture both quick capture and survey 123. And that's just an example of our quick capture sequence that we use for our hippo and croc censuses. So we also rely very heavily on our visitors, on our tourists, to help us with a lot of our data capture. So we use a lot of citizen science data. So we have, as you can see, a whole lot of biodiversity sightings on a platform called iNaturalist. And here you get all the little weird and wonderful things that our field rangers don't necessarily record as they're out in the veld. So some of the butterflies and the little flowers. So a lot of biodiversity information we would not otherwise get is recorded through these citizen science platforms. And then also one of the other ones we use quite a lot is a South African platform called Birdlasser for, surprisingly enough, bird sightings. And all this data then feeds into our sustainable conservation goals. So SANParks has an overarching sustainable conservation goals that align to the SDGs. But in Kruger, we focus a lot on our protected area management, biodiversity conservation, and then very importantly, social economic upliftment. So the communities in and around the Kruger, we are working quite closely with them, with some of the historic landowners, so that the benefits of conservation flows through to the communities and makes Kruger relevant and moving away from this fortress conservation. And some of the key ways in which we do it is, the ecosystem-based management. We don't have 120 million hectares. We only have 2 million hectares. But, we tend to manage at landscape level. We don't go to the detail of our, colleagues in the agricultural sector. We do keep it, fairly broad. We, however, also have species monitoring and research, which focuses on specific species. All of that works together with sustainable development of tourism and operational infrastructure and activities. And then one of our big outcomes of all of this is to make sure that our communities and stakeholders are involved. And that is where the SANParks Vision 2040 comes into play, and we'll be talking about that a bit later. So to take all these various data sources that we have, all these various aspects that we need to take into consideration, we have brought them together in what we call the Kruger Management Interface. And this is an experience builder where we have a variety of departments and outcomes that are, have their own various pages where we go and consolidate all the information that we have. So this is, for example, one of our biodiversity pages that brings together all our biodiversity sightings. So it gives you a very nice dashboard that tells you how much is there, where they are. And the information that goes into our biodiversity dashboard comes from a number of sources. So our ecosystem-based management, some of the big things that goes into it is what we call VCAs, our felt condition assessments. And this has been going on since 1989, and we still do it. And we use these felt condition assessments. We've got 500 sites. Bit of a disclaimer, we don't get to all 500 sites every year, but we try and get through as many of them as possible. And we basically go and do a field visit, and we go and measure people out in the field. They literally measure each clump of grass to see what species, how big it is, how much bare earth there is between, so that we have a good idea of how the vegetation is behaving in these sites. We also have exclosures. Now, an exclosure is basically what its name says. It is to exclude animals. So we have a number of areas that are fenced within Kruger to keep animals out. And we use that as a baseline to determine how much of an impact is on the vegetation is from animals literally eating it, how much of it is from environmental conditions such as rainfall, soil, etc. And so we have our exclosures up and running since 2000. And when we start combining all of these, we can then do a vegetation map, and we try and do these every couple of years so that we can monitor how the vegetation trends over time. Now it's time for the pop quiz. So with us being Kruger National Park, we are quite lucky in that we have a lot of researchers that come and work in the park. So this is LiDAR imagery that was flown for us by the Carnegie Airborne Observatory. And they have come and flown LiDAR. And you can see at the bottom, that's a point cloud that shows you the vegetation. And then we have two maps. So for the map makers in the room, are those two maps of the same area? Hands up for yes. Okay, hands up for no. There's only two answers in this case. For everyone that says yes, this is the same area. The difference is the top image is showing vegetation. The bottom image has got the vegetation stripped away. And here you can see there's the drainage line and the drainage line on that side as well. So this is where the pop quiz comes in. What do you think all these little bumps on the data is? And it is not an error in cleaning up the data. I heard someone say ants. Heveltjies will also kind of go. And it's not ants, it's termites. And we found, to our great surprise, that in this specific area, there's a huge amount of termite mounds. So in a subsequent project, also led by Greg Asner and them, they found that in some areas of the park, the biomass of termites, in other words, the amount of termites, is more than our big herbivores. So we have more termites in certain areas than we have elephant and buffalo. Okay, and we wouldn't have known it without this type of work. We then also look at things such as fire scars. So we've been mapping fire scars since 1941. Okay, back in 1941, it was a hand-drawn map. But these days, we now use Sentinel, and we go and extract the fire scars every month. And we use that to do a fire history map. So the areas that are the dark red have had the most fires over that period, shading through to the dark green, which have a fairly low amount of fires in that time period. And even a couple of areas that are white because we have no record of fires in those areas. We also have the world's longest running fire experiment going back to 1940 with our burn plots. And again, you can see on a satellite image how obvious they are after 80 years or so. We also look at things such as river flows. We use diatoms also to do river health. And we use satellite imagery to map changes within the watercourse itself. And sometimes these changes are quite dramatic. We have lost some of our sampling sites because the river has changed course and the sampling site is actually no longer on a river. Then, of course, we can't have a discussion about Kruger and not look at animals. So we have a number of animal censuses, our rhino census and large herbivore census. And this is just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. So those blocks are 6 by 6 kilometer blocks, which are each flown with a grid inside of them to count our rhinos. And then the lines on the park is for our fixed wing census. And this allows us to then map distribution of animals over time and work out distribution maps for them. It also helps us with what we call species of special concern. So these are species that we are particularly concerned about, either because they are under pressure somehow or they're rare and endangered. And the map that it shows here is Adenium swazicum, or Swazi lily, and that is what we used to know about the Swazi lily in Kruger. Only a couple of spots. But once we started pulling all the data together into a more consolidated database, suddenly our picture of where Swazi lily is in the park has greatly expanded. But you can't work in a system where there are people and not look at sustainable development. So we look at infrastructure management, conservation development framework, and also climate vulnerability. So all of our previous data feeds into what we call our biodiversity sensitivity layers, and these sensitivity layers is what informs decisions around where infrastructure goes. So that then gets mapped into an infrastructure management page, where we also then can see where our zonation is, where our buildings can take place. And then one of the cool tools that our users quite like is this built-in profile tool that's built into the page. So you can then go and draw anyone that's been to Kruger and been near Lower Sabi, gone to Molendozi picnic site. That's the little ridge it's on, and that's the profile of the ridge. And as I say, very cool. Our users quite enjoy it. Which we then also use our climate vulnerability. For us, two of our main concerns are drought and flooding. For that, we have our long-running weather data. This is our rainfall data. This is our manual data that is collected, which then shows how our rainfall patterns have changed, which we then use to go and manage our water provision strategy. And then very quickly, Vision 2040. It basically is SANParks' vision of moving away from this fortress conservation, these parks that are fenced and are very strict about how we can use it, who can come in, doesn't mean that will go away. We are not going to take the fence off Kruger National Park because our lions tend to wander. So, there will still be the more traditional parks, but as some of our other colleagues in, for example, KZN Wildlife have done, there is opportunities to have co-managed areas with local communities, local farmers, so that have biodiversity compatible land uses. And by integrating this, we can expand the footprint of conservation. So we're not expanding the footprint of national parks, we are expanding the footprint of conservation through a whole bunch of strategies so that we have what we call living landscapes. So that outside of the park, we have this area of conservation-compatible land uses that help to then preserve ecosystem services that the communities can then use. Things such as harvesting of natural resources, maintaining and championing the cultural heritage of the area, and then also economic benefits to the communities. And our flag project for that is what we call the Greater Kruger Strategic Development Program, and there's a whole bunch of aspects that go into it, from social economic development through all the way through ecosystem services preservation areas. And when you bring this all together into a single system, you then end up having a healthy, sustainable, biodiverse area that then becomes Kruger. Thank you very much.
Anybody got any question for the audience? For the speakers?
Testing.
Good day, everyone. My name is Cindy Swasimelani from eThekwini Municipality. I work under our Biodiversity Management Department. My question goes to Chenay. I was wondering, how do you guys do zone of influence? Because that question normally comes to me as a GIS for the department. How do you then, do you have a framework in terms of how far do you go outside of the protected area that you examine and you declare that as a zone of influence?
Thanks for that.
It's on.
It's done. Can everyone hear me? Good. So we used to do a standard 10-kilometer buffer as prescribed in NEMPA. But for Kruger, what we did something slightly different, because a lot of the areas, especially around the south of Kruger, are heavily built up. And so we did an extensive exercise where we mapped ecosystem services, we mapped where our constituents were, to come up with an area of influence. That is not the traditional 10-kilometer buffer. And we also incorporated some corridors in there and some strategic water source areas. So we have got our process written, and I can make that available to you. But for many of the parks, they still just use the standard 10-kilometer buffer.
Anybody else? That is a question in the back. Yeah, can you learn? Yeah.
My question goes to Kenneth from Sibanye, or I am disappointed from the housing development policy. I just wanted to ask to Kenneth first, generally, have you had a tailing storage thing?
So far, no. We fortunately do not have those circumstances at this present moment. But we are in full force to really doing our best to monitor them. We do have the piezometers all around our tailing dams. We have contractors who goes there and monitor them, and but what we are trying to do is to then link that to our GIS so that our management will be able to monitor them from the office and be able to see if there are any chances of failing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know, thank you. So I wanted to know, so you said you use the zone of influence tool to identify maybe the building of social facilities if need be. So I wanted to know, how do you account then for natural factors and catastrophic events in using the zone of influence tool to build those facilities? Maybe, so because we don't have control over the traveling of your tailings beyond a certain distance if you do use a buffer, but you have no control over the tailings going beyond the buffer that you have. So do you build the facilities even beyond that buffer, or do you stick to that buffer?
Okay, thank you. So we don't use the buffer. We have hired engineers, environmental engineers, who came and do, they call it what, is it depression? So they check around all our tailing facilities to look at where the facilities are more likely to break. So they use a technology that they are able then to show us where this affluent will more likely going to flow. So it's a serious, well-calculated methodology. So not necessarily just drawing a 5-kilometer buffer and et cetera, et cetera. However, your question, I understand that sometimes you will have possibility of the overflow of this affluent going to the rivers. In that case, obviously, you will have to consider other communities that might be affected by that. So we have established a community relationship in those areas of zones of influence where we know that should there be anything happen, we have identified community members who will be able to assist us should something like that happen. That's number one. Number two, we also have a technology that we use on a regular basis to check if there's any possibility of or if there's any chances of failing. So there's a company that is actually doing that for us. And lastly, I think as an international mining company, we are actually probably open to understand that the impact of our mining, it could be the failure of TSF or any other thing. We should obviously take some responsibility. It doesn't matter how far that impact could it be. But we're using GIS obviously to monitor and see the areas that we think can actually be affected and beyond. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
Any further questions? Yeah?
Sorry, just a quick one for Chenay. I'm sure there's a lot of things you do that you can't really talk about in terms of the data that you gather, but I'm very interested to know what role GIS plays in the whole poaching scenario. Are you heavily involved in that? Is it a part of the strategy to combat poaching?
So I am peripherally involved in it. I am more on the biodiversity and planning side of things, but because a lot of the data I work with feeds into the anti-poaching strategy, we do work closely together, but our anti-poaching unit have their own key members that do it, and they use a variety of sensors and GIS mapping and predictive analysis to work out their strategies. So we are looking at using it.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Can I go? Oh, okay.
Okay. Chenay, out of curiosity, in terms of what you mentioned about the animals in the park, do you've got an accurate record of the number of animals that exist, and you keep track of them, even when they do expand or have babies and increase?
So we have a fairly accurate estimate because our censuses most of them are sample censuses, which we then use statistics to model the number. But because we fly them at fixed intervals, we can then track how the population trends are changing. And when there are areas of concern, such as with the rhino, we can then adapt our strategies to either include an additional survey, even if it is a ground survey method, so that we can keep track of species where there is a concern.
Question, yeah?
Let's go first, yeah. Thanks for saving me the walk.
So hi, I'm Liesel. We're from Sasol Mining. And my question is, first of all, to Kenneth from the mining industry, just around the security management and the application of GIS. Can you maybe just elaborate a bit on, you mentioned briefly on that? I would appreciate if you can just add a bit on that.
Yeah, thank you. It is a very interesting tool that we have developed. So what it does, we found that the security team, they've got an existing SIMS project. So it's just a database management tool. What they do, they just capture incidents. Incidences such as zamazamas, things like if someone stole something, all those security issues. So they record them. So you will have security who will be walking around the mining. They record that information. They bring this information to the data capturer. And all that information goes every single day. It goes to the SIMS. And it just lies there. So we came in as a GIS. We said, okay, this information is not really indeed helping them much. So we then we use an ETL tool to extract that information from that database to the GIS. So then it then provides the actual location of the incidences. So they are now able to see where these different types of incidences are actually happening within our mining area. That is point number one. Number two, we are able to record and show them when these incidences are happening. When? So are they happening on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Number three, at what time does these incidences they normally happen? So they do that. That information, we have an automated ETL tool that runs to extract that information from the SIMS to the GIS, and then they are able to see that information every single day. So in other words, then you have a graph. Yeah. That graph, you are able to say, okay, at Marikana operation, I want to understand what has been happening for the last week in terms of these security incidences. And there are a number of, Josina can actually even tell you, there are a number of incidences, security incidences that we record. So you can actually, if you're interested in Zamazamas, you will then be able to say Zamazamas are happening at this chapter number 1 and chapter number 2, and they're happening on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, or at 2 o'clock. And then we will then be able to provide resources.
Okay, so you would typically look at trends to see whether you can predict certain things. Okay, now that's interesting. Then, thanks for sharing. Then I have a question to is it Michael? Okay. Just around that thinking around the future, and you mentioned things that you still want to consider. One of it was the prediction modeling. Maybe you can just elaborate typically on what your approach will be and your thinking around that, where you want to, or typically what do you want to predict and how you will incorporate that into the GIS way of doing. I don't know if that's clear.
Sonia.
Okay. First of all, I was excited to get a question. And then when I heard the question, I'm like, oh dear. Like, maybe I wish I didn't get that question. Right? Now you see. Stumped, right? No, I think the key is similar to also what the gentleman earlier, completely forget his name, with the Esri, kind of having that AI to kind of like predict and automatically give you the answers, right? So it's the same thing. Is that first of all, with any GIS product, you have to have good data in, right? If you don't have that, you're not going to predict anything, and if you do predict it, it's going to be rubbish. So if you can get that part first and solved and standardize that, I think there's a session later on about standardization of data, which is really important. And if you can get a global standardization, even better. But if you can get that standardized data coming in and then running similar to kind of trend analysis and understanding and heat maps and risk maps or whatever your case is, then you can say to a certain area, like in Asia or in this particular region, we can expect further deforestation in these areas based on the last, I don't know, X amount of years of monitoring and analysis. And that brings me to the important part of monitoring, because people often think, oh, let's just start monitoring, right? It's great, it's good, you've got a start point, that's a win, but you have to have a baseline of your monitoring. So is your baseline going to be 10 years back? Because then you need to go back and process 10 years in order to understand what that baseline is. And once you understand what that baseline is and the monitoring, you can then put into the trends analysis and then forecasting. For us, our biggest headache is getting through 120 million hectares. If we can solve that in a quicker manner, we can then look at degrees of forecasting to provide further insights and then obviously assist them with the return of investment. Yeah, I mean, Thank you so much for an easy question. Once again, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know. At this stage, yeah. So yeah, no. I mean, a good question. You know, it's in on the future. Generally speaking, if we run into issues like that where we need to now understand and create further insights on more predictive or best guess kind of analysis, we normally go to Richard from Esri first, and we speak to him, and we say, what do you have? How can we do it? How can we implement it? And you know, what type of resources it's going to take on our side and our processing side in order to achieve those goals. But then also it's a case of understanding what the client wants also. And we often sometimes fall into that trap by thinking that the client wants these types of things that they might not want. I probably didn't answer your question very well, but maybe later on when I have a better answer, I'll find you and then talk.
Lydia?
Yes, hi.
Joyce.
I'm Joyce from Standard Bank. So my question is to Thabang. So, yeah, I just want to try and understand. The GIS that you guys are doing is more for a scaffolding health task. That's the focus of what you're doing. Out of interest, is there any other places in your organization where GIS is being used? Would you know for what? And that's my first question. So I've got 3 questions for you. So that's the first one. The second one is the work that you've been doing, which I think is absolutely great. What has been the reception of that? What has that been like? Who's your audience, firstly? And how has that work been received? And then you touched a little bit in your conclusion on predictive health or predictive scaffolding. How are you guys doing that currently? And maybe, I mean, just to link in the last question that was, because I was also thinking around the lines of like, how would you approach that?
Thank you, Joyce. Say save the best for last. No, thank you, Joyce. The first question is, where else do we use GIS within Sasol? It's actually very, very wide. We use it in a lot of things, actually. One of it, so we have, let me put it this way. So you have 2 core groups, right? You have the mining group and we have the petrochemical group. The mining group deals with mining issues, environmental, geology, mine closure, planning, as well as surveying, right? And my colleagues are there. Some of them, they are just my GIS colleagues there. And then we have petrochemical, right? And petrochemical is more on resource monitoring, such as specifically on engineering, such as civil engineering, to understand the inspections and build those dashboards to understand the asset maintenance and management strategies. Those are very important in our environment. Other than that, we also use it for issues. We also use it for environmental management as well. So it's quite a variety, and it's a catalog. So I just decided to do this because the recent project that was currently done. And we can have an offline conversation about the details of those. It's actually quite broad. We have a team of probably over 10 people that are GIS specialists, and looking at all various sectors within the business. So this specific solution that I presented today, and which you are asking about the reception of the work and the audience of this specific solution. The specific solutions, it was for the planning department, the engineering and maintenance planning department, which had an issue of obviously audit trails that kept on coming on. And one of the identified issues was that there was no location of where the scaffolds are at, so there was no accountability. We had to digitize the scaffold inspection forms, as they were actually done via paper-based. You can imagine trying to get over that just to actually go through and do your audit. And and that solving that could actually ensure that you are compliant from a safety point of view. And that is very important, for Sasol, because Sasol, seeks to continuously achieve zero harm. We want to operate our resources without any harm, so people are at our heart. So that's and the reception is quite great. There are some issues about change management, and it's quite interesting that yesterday's plenary session they talked about how interesting is change management. I was thinking about it and say it's so interesting that change management is a problem and people don't want to adapt and change, and typically because they don't want to get to a point whereby they're being kept accountable of. It's all about accountability. Systems provide accountability, which is the issue for a lot of people, and that's why maybe change management is a problem. The last question with the predictive analysis, I'm gonna just refer back to this. We want to get there. We're not doing it yet. We're feeling that as we get more data, because currently more data is in paper-based. As we get more data, more accurate data into our systems, that we can be able to actually then do predictive analysis. And without that data currently, that is sitting actually most of it in paper-based, because we haven't brought that paper-based data, historical data, into our system. So we are just continuously doing this from start now. You know what I mean? So maybe there will be a project to actually bring the historic data inside there, and maybe when that is the case, maybe we can do predictive analysis.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, finally my turn. Yeah. Okay, I just got a few questions. Firstly, I must say, the perception of mining is mining companies pillage resources, right? But I must say, it's heartening, and I know this because I work with you all, but I think the general perception, people don't know this. You'll do a lot to resuscitate in the environment as well. And its safety is big. It's you want to save lives, and I think the most heartening thing is the amount that's put back in social, into the communities, in terms of, Kenneth, you spoke about the clinics and hospitals and schools and so on. The general public doesn't know that. All they know is mining companies take our resources and make money. So, yeah, thanks for that. I think the question to you, Kenneth, is how did your spatial mapping project benefit the business, Sibanye as a business?
Thank you, Ravi. You cannot manage what you don't know. So at Sibanye, it was very critical that they begin to understand the project that they're implementing. One, they need to understand where are these projects located. So it was a huge challenge when the government came to ask them to account. Communities will go to the government and say Sibanye is not doing anything with regard to SLP and CSI projects. Now they come to Sibanye does not, they've got spreadsheet all over. So how this benefited Sibanye is that a dashboard that we have developed was used to present all those projects that has been implemented. That was a huge turnaround. So now communities are unable to say anything because they can see everything on the screen. They can see the progress of those projects. They can see where this project are located. They can actually even see the pictures that has been taken for those projects. And it was a complete turnaround in terms of how now Sibanye and the community relate. Thank you.
100%. Thanks, Kenneth. Michael, we worked with you quite a while now as a business partner, and you'll work with quite a few companies in the environmental and sustainability space. What do you see as the biggest hindrance in terms of driving sustainability?
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. I think based on the companies that we've done work with, mainly commercial forestry companies, tobacco, cocoa companies, coffee companies, mainly European companies, we kind of see it's still very much a nice to have type thing for companies. Like they will have the sustainability and environmental department. And they are responsible for the person that writes in the store wall as you walk in 100% sustainably sourced. Right. But then when it comes down to is it really 100% sustainably sourced, it does cost a lot of money and budget in order to try and achieve those type of answers. So we see twofold, a struggle with the budget for a lot of the companies. So they generally get small budgets for using our type of analysis to provide them the answers. And then it's probably derived from like a legislation perspective where there's not a big enough stick to say, well, if you don't do this, you're going to get fined 20% of your revenue, right, or something like that. So at the moment, it's still wishy-washy, and it's nice to have, and it looks good. But I don't think there's any accountability and proper audits thereafter where if you don't meet those goals that you've set out or that you've done, then you're going to get fined a certain level. And until you have that, I don't think you can really be taken seriously.
So the carrot and stick approach, right? The benefits for doing it and the punishment for not doing it. 100%. Chenay, from a SANPark perspective, with technology evolving, I mean, we've seen a whole lot of things about AI. How do you see AI being used at Kruger National Park or SANParks as a whole in terms of conservation management, how to improve conservation management?
Thank you for that. So we do use AI quite a bit already. We use it in a lot of our parks for our camera trap data. So instead of having to manually sit and go through, 10,000 photos, most of which are grass, you get the AI to do it for you. We are also looking at streamlining our sensors, because currently how our sensors works is we literally have physical people sitting in a helicopter for 6 weeks counting things as they fly over them. So we're looking at maybe doing some kind of aerial photography and then using an AI, a model to do the counting for us. But even just from a day-to-day streamlining, data cleaning, data consolidation, AI has become quite integral just in normal day-to-day work, which does save time, which in the end makes things more efficient.
Great, thanks. The last question is for Thabang. How does your project align to the Sasol's sustainability goals, Thabang?
Thanks, Ravi. So I guess Sasol is big on zero harm, safety, sustainability, and amongst many core values, as well as transparency. And this solution really, embeds these sustainable principles by actually integrating sustainable principles into our safety operations, ensuring that people are safe, ensuring that there is accountability, so everybody knows where the scaffolds are at and what is their status, and that is core to Sasol's value.
Great. I must say, well done to all of them. Give them a hand. I think, with our core values as Esri, simplifying decisions, making a difference, there is no doubt that these guys are making a difference and these organizations are making a difference. So well done to you guys. Okay.